Well, just fresh off the transporter, fresh from the swamp in the depths of depravity. Here is one of the 16 surviving, and it's barely surviving, but one of the 16 Brubaker Boxes Automecha sports vans. Lovely interior. I'm sure there's some snakes in here and who knows what else. But I guess we'll find out, and we'll keep our Venom kit close by. Doesn't everybody?
Automotive history's most obscure kit cars gets a celebrity introduction.
I would rather drive something like this than the most expensive sports car you can buy.
And the creator behind it all,
all right.
returns.
Oh, wow. The Brubaker Box.
In the early 70s, one concept van made waves in the automotive world. With distinct dystopian future looks and a completely different design and idea of what a van could be. But probably the most interesting aspect of these is how little information exists about this unique vehicle and its enigmatic creator. An inventor slash aviator and automotive designer from Southern California who produced a new kind of van that could be built on a Volkswagen Beetle chassis, Curtis Brubaker. Before flipping the van world upside down with his unique creation, Curtis designed planes for Learjet and developed technology for General Motors that would lead to touchscreens. In 1971, he built a prototype of his minivan as a rebodied kit car called a Brubaker Box and enticed enough investors that he decided to build the vehicles completely instead of as a rebodied kit car. The Brubaker Box shell consisted of 13 fiberglass panels riveted and bonded together to fit over a Beetle chassis and required a hodgepodge of parts from other vehicles. But probably the most unique feature of this van was a set of real wooden bumpers. Ultimately, Curtis couldn't reach a deal with Volkswagen to sell him only the chassis and drivetrains, and was forced to declare bankruptcy after only finishing 3 Brubaker boxes. Investors in the company tried to keep his idea alive by manufacturing the shells and selling them as kits to buyers who would supply their own chassis. Mike Hansen's Automecha, who originally sold this Brubaker, would go on to produce 25 more. Between these two companies, only 19 Brubaker boxes are known to exist today.
I'd rather drive something like this than the most expensive sports car you can buy because it's just so much more fun.
The inside of the car had a layout that maximized both space and 70s decor. The gas tank, well, that doubled as an ottoman with a wraparound couch in the rear-forming mini lounge. So I've been trying to find Curtis Brubaker. I hear he's a bit of an enigma, hard to find. But holy crap, I can't find this guy anywhere. You guys have the #1 Brubaker box? Yeah. Awesome. And you've actually talked to Curtis before? Yeah. I appreciate it. And I will follow up with you and look forward to it. Thank you. Got a chance.
Coming up,
Is this really the #1 Brubaker?
yeah, Dave and Jeff check out the original Brubaker box.
Nice.
And
While Bill was searching for Curtis Brubaker's contact information, he actually stumbled across the dudes who found the #1 Brubaker box.
The best part is they're local, and they were able to get Bo in touch with Curtis Brubaker. So while he's doing that,
Jeff and I are here to see the original Brubaker box and get some answers about the Brubaker box we're restoring. Hey, how's it going?
hey, how you doing?
Gentlemen, hi. Hey,
Good
Jeff,
to
good to
meet
meet you.
My name's Tomo Bullum.
I'm Dale Davis.
We've got the Holy Grail.
So this is our dude.
This is our dude.
Wow.
Nice.
This is the very first original Brubaker box that ever existed.
And Curtis confirmed that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Dale and I hopped on an airplane, went to Florida. We had to unearth this thing. At that time, we didn't know that this was the #1 box. Once we finally got it back to our shop, did research, got in touch with Curtis Brubaker, then we found out that we have a #1 car.
So these are the bumper brackets for the wooden bumpers?
Yeah.
We actually have the molds for that.
Oh. Is that right?
Like the original?
Yeah.
Is that something that we may borrow? Perhaps?
Oh, he's rubbing his hands.
Got a 3.5-inch arc. Our friends that had the Brubaker #1 were nice enough to loan me these molds to make the bumpers for Jeff Dunham's Brubaker. There you go, sir.
Oh, all right. Those look pretty credible, like our originals. My name is Kurt Brubaker, designer of the Brubaker Box. It's an amazing job you did.
Things have changed a little bit since the early 70s.
Thanks to Dale and Tomo, the guys who found Brubaker Box #1, I got in touch with the Curtis Brubaker. I can't even begin to explain how awesome this is.
The Brubaker Box being built for Jeff Dunham, wanted to give him a hand. Went back into history and looking at how the originals were built.
I have so many questions.
Oh man, so
Ask him, what exactly was the plan for this whole space under the dash?
That is what is today a frunk.
A front.
Oh, right on.
Front trunk.
Only we access it from the inside.
How did you come up with this idea and design?
My brother had a VW van. We were all sitting in my office, and we looked out, and sure enough, it was rolling down Pico. Somebody was stealing it. I was thinking, why is this guy stealing a used Volkswagen truck? And we got to thinking about all the surfer kids who were driving these things.
Yeah.
We took a trip down to Newport Beach. I took one picture where there's like 7 or 8 of them on one street, tiny street. This is a market here. But not for a conventional one, something that appeals more to the kids.
This vehicle really makes a lot more sense now, knowing that it was created for surfers and the younger demographic to basically be the coolest minivan ever.
We're actually planning to put an 8-track in here.
If you put that in, I can claim part of the design of that.
What do you mean?
I worked on the 8-track with Bill Lear. He hired me to do his airplane, the Learjet. Bill had this idea for a sealed cassette. You never had to rewind. We were moonlighting and building the first 8-track.
So wait, you helped develop the 8-track player?
Yeah.
You're kidding. That's phenomenal.
That's phenomenal.
What else did you design we don't know about?
I forget.
Okay, so far we know that Curtis Brubaker was directly part of the development and the creation of the Brubaker Box kit car and the 8-track cassette player. But through our research, we've actually learned that he was involved in the development of many technological advancements, which officially makes him one of the most famous inventors that you've never heard of. Now, I understand you brought some slides to help us with the restoration.
Yeah, I brought you through the early stage. Starts with a 5th scale clay model.
That's so cool.
50 years ago, we were building this thing, not knowing who the hell we were or what we were doing, and trying to build a unique car.
And this is all the prototypes?
That's the prototype at the LA Auto Show.
Oh.
That's when we debuted it. We got the crowds. We found there was such a tremendous interest in the product. I mean, there were more people wanting to lay down cash for one of these things. That was a total surprise for us.
Is that you?
So checking out the quality control, we had difficulty in raising money and trying to get a source of knockdown chassis. And that's where our limited production ended.
Having access to these slides actually helps us understand some of the mystery of this car. And frankly, the brilliance of Curtis Brubaker and how he developed this one-of-a-kind vehicle.
It's one of the original posters.
Oh, wow.
It's personally rewarding to see the design has held on as long as it has. It looks like they're going to do a very commendable restoration.
I mean, check these out. Get into it.
When Dunham and I were down to go see the first Brubaker, they had a bunch of the original molds, and they gave me an already made cover for the floating dash. That dude just needs to live like that.
We just need to make a structure to support this.
One of the more unique features of this Brubaker box is its floating dash. After talking to Curtis Brubaker, we know that the front of this thing is supposed to have a storage area that's accessible from the inside. I dig it. I think more cars should have this whole floating dash thing. This thing's rad. Easily, it's my favorite part of this whole car.
That's my perfect. All right, that's great.
What started out as a project to bring this quirky sports van back to life actually turned into an insightful journey to fulfill its destiny and provide a youthful, sporty alternative to the utilitarian classics. Curtis Brubaker. Unfortunately, his endeavor and subsequent attempts to produce a new kind of van were a wipeout. And as stewards of automotive history, we couldn't let his forward-thinking vision wash away into obscurity. The Brubaker Box. A minivan with an aggressive rake and sporty exterior, capturing the aesthetic trends of the era. challenge with his restoration was a complete lack of information and replacement parts. But with molds from Brubaker Box number 1, I have so many questions. Ask him. And insight from its creator, Curtis Brubaker, we were able to bring this creation back to the world. And today we're in Malibu, cruising to the beach in style, just as Curtis Brubaker intended to do.
I gotta tell you, the way that the guys took this back to what it was supposed to look like, just great. And the fact that there's an 8-track,
I mean, it's brand new, which is pretty incredible.
yeah.
Redid the interior, redid all the seats, all the carpets. Obviously, on the exterior, we recreated the wooden bumpers out of metal, the paint.
I think it looks beautiful in the sun. It's fantastic.
It totally changes in the sun. It just lights up. It's beautiful.
This thing is just magnificent. It's just so much fun. It has personality oozing out of it. You can tell this car has a soul, and it's a lot happier now. The suspension is great. It rides really well. I don't think this could be more fun to drive. It's very easy.
Well, that was the idea. You said you want something as a daily driver, so here we are, man.
This is not a Sunday driver. This is get out and just have fun with it on any day. And if you want attention, I don't know how you get more attention than in that thing. Oh no, here it comes. Do we have a plate on this thing?
Well, you are getting pulled over. Oh.
It's called a Brubaker Box. What? Brubaker Box from 1975.
Wow, is that a new track?
Yeah, we got an 8-track for it.
Alright, I just wanted to know what this was. Have fun.
Thanks,
I
officer.
gotta tell you, we couldn't have picked a better day to be driving this thing. The sun is out, it's cool.
And we couldn't have picked a better vehicle to bring to the beach. Well, how was it? Dude, it's incredible. I've never been anything like this, man.
No?
No.
No, this thing was an absolute blast. We got pulled over, but the guy was
They were very nice.
yeah, the guy was really nice.
Very, very
yeah,
nice.
LAPD guy pulled us over.
He thought the van looked cool and wanted to see what we were driving. Shut up.
Right, so
Wow.
yeah, so this is really, really cool.
Yo, this is insane. Whoa. When we started out on this build, we really didn't know anything about the Brubaker Box other than it had a cool, unique look. But through this process and meeting its creator, we learned that it was all by design.
You guys have an awesome car here, bro.
Thanks, man.
I'm glad you like it.
Curtis Brubaker's divergent, youthful interpretation of a van definitely accomplishes what he set out to do. And being able to share it with the world and see people's positive reaction proves that.
Well, this was great. Guys, I gotta go pick up my boys at school. Can we get a ride back to Galvin? Sure. Why not? All right. Shotgun.
Oh, I get to lounge in the back.
Oh, man.
Ooh, I get to lounge with Mike. What's so special about the Brubaker Box is that it represents an era of fearless optimism in automotive history. One where entrepreneurs and car designers saw needs that weren't met and created their own car companies. These people brought their visions to the road, drove innovation, and kept car culture moving forward.
I have zero complaints about this thing.
That's what I want to hear.
Yeah! I'm not the stepping stone. I'm not the stepping stone. You're trying to make your mark in society. You're using all the tricks that you used on me. You're reading all them high fashion magazines. The clothes you're wearing.
We're over at Skull Motorcycle Shop with Mike Hansen and Deborah, and we're talking today a little bit about the Brubaker Box and the Auto Mecha Sports Van Rover. Deborah, you started Brubaker Box fans on Facebook, and I think it was partially to kind of continue your dad's legacy, probably partially because of the book that you're writing. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the book was really my dad's idea. I contacted him, and my dad just got excited again about this car, and that there was interest in it, that there was one out on the road. And we started talking, he and I, and he said, I bet there's others out there. And I said, well, one way to find them is is to create a place on the internet where they can find us. So we created the Brubaker Box fans Facebook group. And I keep saying I'm going to finish it, and hopefully I will, mainly for my dad.
Well, we hope you do too. And there's lots of other people who are equally looking forward to that, I'm sure.
I think so. That's what I've been told.
So what kind of legacy do you envision for your father, and what are your thoughts about the future of the box and carrying on his dream?
Well, I'm sure he would love to see it be hundreds of them made again.
But as a kit car, though,
Yeah, as a kid you can
I think
do
that
it.
would be fantastic. Owner-built kind of thing.
And they really are safe because you're sitting so far back from the front end. So in any kind of collision that you hit something, you have all of that crumpling up before it gets to the driver, so.
You drove lots, Mike, you drove lots of boxes, Deborah was saying.
Almost all of them, probably.
Almost all of them. So there's got to be some kind of memorable story from driving one of them, or reactions that you got as you were cruising around.
Sure. Well, there were times that I would come out. Anytime you stopped somewhere and you came out, like left it in a parking lot or whatever, be a crowd of people around it. You have to kind of fight your way in there to get in there. And there were one time at least, that I found someone inside the car sitting in it.
Moved in, huh?
Yeah, I don't know how they figured out how to open the door, but
Well, the back is rather inviting, you gotta
Yeah,
say.
it is.
I don't know how many vehicles there are that have an ottoman in
No.
the back seat.
yeah, it's very comfortable back there.
Yeah.
In those cars we had.
You entered a race with one of the boxes,
Mm-hmm.
and which race was that you did that?
It was the Mickey Thompson Riverside Off-Road Race.
And I hear you didn't finish exactly the way you wanted to finish.
Not so well. But first lap, my dad drove it, and it was a pretty far lap. It was a long course. First lap or two, he drove it. And then we came in and had something taped back on or whatever that was falling apart on it. And at that stop, we changed and I drove it. And I was taking it easy because we're having front end trouble. Every time we hit a big bump, it bent the tie rod. And then our steering was weird. And I guess they had just straightened it. So I was kind of taking it easy. And he's going, just go for it, just go for it. And he kept saying that. And then finally at one point I go, I'm going for it. I just hammered it and I hit this bump and just went way up in the air. And then we went right on the nose.
Oh, man.
And I remember the battery was bolted to the back floor. It flew out the window between the two of us and onto the ground. And that was the end of it. That car never drove again, but it was
man.
spectacular.
So your dad was a passenger when you were driving that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
And they really, it's got a lot of possibilities. But everyone loves it when they see it, especially when you see it in person, because it's smaller than you imagine when you see a picture.
As far as his legacy on a personal basis, our dad was quite the dreamer and just loved the unusual aspect of this car. He just loved the car, and I'm sure just having it live on in some way or another, being restored, having them out there driving around, that he's just would be tickled pink with that. He would just love
Maybe
that.
something, a kit for the future with alternative power sources, alternative fuels. We know there's a number of people who've contacted us who keep talking about, well, what about a 4x4, or what about an electric platform? What do you think? Think that's something viable? Think that'd be something kind of cool to have out on the streets?
There's a lot of platforms out there these days that you could do that with. It's kind of like in the turn of the century when Ford was making trucks. They only made chassis. And then you went to someone else to have whatever truck bed you put on it. Well, there's companies that you can buy just chassis, I think, that are electric ones or 4-wheel drive. You can buy a 4-wheel drive truck chassis that's probably would fit under that body. We're not that far away from having everything be self-driving anyways, so it's perfect for that.
Cool, huh?
Yeah, you take away that steering wheel and everything there, and you just have a, I don't know, a buffet up there in the front, you know. There's room for a picnic up there. We actually built a car that had an ice chest up there.
Really?
Electric one.
And then there were beer taps on the outside.
Yes.
Beer mobile.